I was walking my dog by our private lake, same lake my family's owned for generations, when I spotted something weird. A kid was throwing a stick into the water, and my dog chased after it. That's when I realized these people weren't guests. They were HOA residents who'd been using my lake like their own backyard park. What happened next? Let's just say, their HOA ended up writing me a check. I inherited my grandfather's ranch about 2 years ago. 60 acres of rolling fields, thick woods, and a gorgeous private lake tucked into the far corner of the property. That land had been in my family for generations. The title was handwritten. When it first passed into our name, old school, signed in ink, and later digitized by the county. But to us, it was more than land. It was our legacy. This lake wasn't just beautiful. It was special. As a kid, I'd sit on the edge of the dock with my grandpa, catching bass and skipping stones while he told stories about the old days. Later, it became the spot where we held family cookouts, camped under the stars, and celebrated birthdays and graduations. It was the kind of place you picture when someone says, peace and quiet. You could sit there for hours and hear nothing but birds, crickets, and the soft lapping of water. The lake sat at the rear of the property, hugged by a dense tree line on 3 sides. The 4th side opened up into a large grassy pasture, perfect for cattle, if I'd ever bothered to keep any. For us it was open space, untouched, beautiful, and always private. But about a year before I moved in full-time, something changed. Went by. The far edge of those woods, just past my tree line, a new development started going up. I remember driving out one weekend and seeing heavy equipment in the distance. Bulldozers, orange flags, concrete trucks. I didn't think much of it at the time. Just figured it was another suburban sprawl project. I was wrong. Fast forward 6 months, and that patch of land had transformed into a full-blown neighborhood. You know the type. Perfect lawns, identical houses, driveway basketball hoops, mailboxes all in a row, and smack in the center of it all, a big wooden sign that said, "Welcome to Pine Ridge Estates, a private HOA community." At first I didn't think it mattered. After all, there was still a thick patch of woods between us, no roads connecting the two, no fences down, and no access point that crossed into my property. But I started noticing little things. First, it was trash. Not a lot, but more than usual. Candy wrappers, beer cans, even a disposable grill once. Then I found footprints near the lake. Big ones, little ones. Not from deer or raccoons. I mean people footprints. Shoes. One morning, I walked out there and found a half-burned pile of wood, charred marshmallow sticks sticking out of the ground, and a grocery bag full of empty soda bottles. That was the first time I realized something was off. It didn't take long to piece it together. See, I never had a fence along the back edge of my land. There wasn't any reason to. The trees were thick, and the area had always been isolated. But now, that natural barrier wasn't enough. Turns out people from the new HOA neighborhood had been sneaking through the woods and using my lake as if it were part of their community. They thought my lake was their private park. Now, I want you to imagine how insane that is. This isn't a pond that straddles 2 backyards. This is a full-on private lake, wholly and legally within my family's land for nearly a century. We have the deed, the topographic maps, the satellite imagery. There's no overlap. And yet, somehow, these HOA residents got it into their heads that it was theirs. I wouldn't have believed it myself if I hadn't followed that trail one day. I had my suspicions, and so I decided to check. I started near the old oak tree that marks the corner of the pasture and walked straight toward the densest part of the woods, where I'd seen some of those mysterious footprints before. And sure enough, there it was. A winding dirt path, carved into the underbrush like a little forest road. It wasn't made by animals. It was clearly worn down by repeated foot traffic. The ground was compacted, sticks broken, brush cleared just enough to walk comfortably. And that trail went straight from the edge of my lake, right into their neighborhood. At the end of the path, behind one of the HOA homes, someone had even put up a makeshift wooden sign. It said, "Lake access, residents only." I just stood there for a moment staring, speechless. The audacity. It wasn't just one or two people taking a shortcut. This was deliberate, organized, claimed. I walked back to my house that day feeling equal parts furious and violated, not just because they were trespassing, but because they knew it wasn't theirs. That sign proved it. If they thought they had legal access, they wouldn't need to sneak in through the backwoods. They wouldn't need a trail, and they definitely wouldn't need to hide it behind the trees. And yet, for months, possibly even years, these HOA folks had been helping themselves to our family's lake like it was part of their weekend amenity package. They came to fish, to picnic, to camp. One guy even left a collapsible kayak leaning against a tree stump like it was his personal boat rack. What infuriated me the most was how they never even bothered to ask. Not once. No letter. No knock on the door. Nothing. They just took. To make matters worse, when I spoke with a buddy who lives in the area, he told me he'd seen Facebook posts in the HOA group with pictures of families at the lake. Photos of kids swimming, dogs splashing, and comments like, "Love having this beautiful lake right behind the neighborhood." Or, my favorite, "We're so lucky the builder gave us lake access." That's when the reality hit hard. They'd been sold a lie. And now, I was stuck dealing with the consequences. Somewhere along the line, either the builder hinted at lake proximity and let buyers assume it was shared, or the HOA board simply decided to adopt it. Either way, it didn't change the facts. The lake was mine, and I had the documents to prove it. But things didn't stop there. Because after I installed a few private property, no trespassing signs around the lake, polite, clear, and fully legal, someone ripped them down, not once but twice. I replaced them with metal ones and bolted them to fence posts. Days later, I found spray paint across one that said, "Not yours." That's when I knew this wasn't just ignorance. This was war. I called the HOA president directly. Her name was Karen. Yes, I swear that's real. And she answered with the fakest "hello" I've ever heard. I calmly explained the situation, that her community was trespassing, that the lake wasn't part of their HOA, that we had legal documentation, and I asked her to please send out a notice informing residents that the trail needed to be closed. Her response? "Oh, our trail? That's been there since before you moved in. And the lake's always been part of the neighborhood experience. You can't just cut people off from nature like that. It's unfair to the residents." Unfair? I asked her one question. "Can you show me a single piece of paper that says the HOA owns even 1 inch of my land?" She paused, then said, "We'll have to check with our legal team." Click. I was done being nice. They wanted to pretend. The lake was theirs? Time to show them what a real landowner can do. One summer weekend, I decided to do something special for my nephews. School was out, the skies were clear, and I knew just the place. A quiet, tree-lined lake that sat tucked away on the far side of my property. It's the kind of peaceful spot that doesn't show up on any public maps. No roads lead to it, no signs point toward it. Just woods, water, and total stillness. It's been in my family for decades, and legally, that entire lake is mine. So, we packed up tents, fishing gear, and a big cooler full of burgers, hot dogs, and s'mores supplies. The boys were hyped. We hiked in, set up camp along the shoreline, got a fire going, and by dusk, we were telling ghost stories under the stars. The only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the occasional splash of a fish breaking the surface of the water. Then, bam! A flashlight beam cut through the trees. I blinked, shielding my eyes, as two figures stepped out from the shadows. Police officers, both with hands near their hips and a stern look on their faces. The fire crackled behind me as my youngest nephew whispered, "Are we in trouble?" One officer stepped forward. "Sir, we received a call about trespassers on private community property. At first I thought it was a joke. I mean, who exactly were we trespassing on?" I stood up, brushing dirt from my jeans. "This isn't community property. This is my land. My name's on the deed." The officers paused. One of them, Officer Kent, I think, asked if I had any proof. I didn't even flinch. Pulled out my phone, opened my files, and showed them everything. A high-resolution property survey, a digital copy of the deed, and the official county parcel map with boundaries clearly marked. I even had GPS coordinates showing exactly where we were standing. All of it pointed to the same fact. We were well within the borders of my private land. The lake? Mine. The trail we walked in on? Mine. The woods around us? Mine. One officer turned to the other and said, "Well, that's clear. I could have ended it there. But I wasn't done. Because this wasn't the first time the HOA had pulled something shady. Not even close. See, years ago, when they first built the subdivision, a few miles away they started using the lake unofficially. People would hike in, fish, kayak, even bring dogs and hold community picnics. I didn't mind too much at first. I believe in being a good neighbor. But as time went on, their use grew bolder and more entitled. Someone installed a homemade sign by one of the side trails that said, "Community Lake Access." That was my first warning. Then came the foot traffic. Hordes of people every weekend, blasting music, leaving trash, letting their dogs run wild, and not once did anyone ask permission. I contacted the HOA president, a woman named Lynn Patterson. I explained politely that the lake was private, not part of their community, and that the boundary lines were very clear. Her response? "We were told the lake was part of our neighborhood plan." Told by who? The wind? It was nonsense. And I said so. Still, I didn't escalate. I sent a formal notice through my lawyer, along with a copy of the land records. I figured that would settle it. Apparently it didn't. Instead, they decided to call the cops on me, on my own land. So after I cleared things up with the officers that night, I asked them who made the report. They confirmed what I suspected. It was the HOA president. I thanked them, let them know they were welcome to stick around for marshmallows if they wanted. They declined politely, and they headed out. But I wasn't about to let this go. That week I went to the county records office and had a fresh boundary survey done, just to make everything ironclad. I updated my property signage, ordered no trespassing signs with reflective lettering, and installed a pair of trail cameras to monitor the entry paths. Not to mention, I installed a brand new gate at the old trailhead that led from the HOA neighborhood toward my lake, a gate that remained locked, with a legal notice posted right next to it. Then I filed a formal cease and desist letter through my attorney, complete with GPS coordinates, land records, and photographic proof of past trespasses. But that wasn't the end. The HOA, instead of backing down, decided to double down. They sent me a letter accusing me of disrupting community enjoyment of shared resources. Shared resources? I laughed out loud when I read it. I crafted a response, one that made things very, very clear. This lake and surrounding land are privately owned, as confirmed by county records. There is no easement, public access, or legal claim the HOA or its residents have to any part of my property. Further attempts to trespass, claim ownership, or disrupt my use of the land will result in civil action. Signed, sealed, delivered. 2 weeks later, I caught 2 men from the neighborhood trying to scale the new gate with a canoe. Guess what? One of the trail cameras got them. Crystal clear, full face shot, license plate and all. I sent the footage to the sheriff's office, filed a police report for trespassing, and let the legal wheels turn. After that, things got quiet. Uncomfortably quiet. A few months went by, and then I heard through a mutual friend that the HOA held an emergency meeting to discuss land access issues. Lynn Patterson stepped down as president shortly after that. But here's the kicker. Turns out their original developer had tried to negotiate for access to the lake decades ago, but was denied. That detail conveniently disappeared from their community welcome packet, of course. So all those new residents? They were sold a dream that was never real. They'd been using my lake under false assumptions. Some of them were angry, but not at me, at the HOA, at the lies, at the fact that someone called the cops instead of simply reading a map. Now, the trail to my lake is permanently closed to the public. Only I and a handful of trusted friends have the key to that gate. My nephews still talk about that night. Not because we made s'mores or told ghost stories, but because they saw what it means to stand up for what's yours. Calmly, legally, relentlessly. And the best part? The lake is peaceful again. No trash. No loud parties. No HOA members pretending it's theirs. Just quiet water, rustling leaves, and the occasional ripple of a fish under the moonlight. So the next time someone tells you that HOAs only have power if you're a member, believe it. Because the second they step off their land and try to police yours, you show them the deed. You show them the line, and you don't back down. The next morning, with the smell of last night's campfire still lingering on my clothes, I grabbed a coffee and walked to the far side of my lake. The sun had just started to rise, casting gold across the water and shimmering off the dew-covered grass. It should have been peaceful. But I couldn't shake the image of those police officers the night before, standing stiff by my tent, asking me what I was doing on my own land. Something didn't sit right. So I kept walking. I crossed the dam, skirted past the tree line, and pushed a little deeper into the woods. That's when I saw it. A worn dirt trail cutting through the underbrush, not something nature made on its own. This trail had been used. A lot. The soil was packed flat. Small tire tracks dug into the sides, likely from bikes, maybe a golf cart. And the kicker? Footprints. Dozens of them, crisscrossing and fading into the tree line. I kept following the path, curiosity turning into suspicion with every step. And that's when I started spotting the trash. An old Gatorade bottle, a couple chip bags, a used-up can of bug spray. Someone had been treating this part of my land like a public campground. The trail eventually opened up into a small clearing, the kind you only find if you know exactly where to look. Right at the edge was a crude wooden sign nailed to a tree. I walked up and stared at it. Lake access, hand-painted in white letters, complete with a little arrow pointing back toward my lake. That's when it hit me. They knew this wasn't their land. They knew it wasn't part of their community property, but they used it anyway, quietly, secretly. They just assumed I'd never find out. See, my lake sits on the edge of my property, hundreds of acres that I inherited from my grandfather. It backs up to a sprawling suburban neighborhood run by an HOA. The same one that called the cops on me the night before while I was roasting marshmallows with my nephews. Apparently, I was trespassing on community land. But now, here I was, standing on my property staring at a trail used by them. I didn't get angry. I got focused. Step 1. Call a surveyor. I had my land surveyed again, this time with extra emphasis on the area bordering the HOA neighborhood. The results confirmed what I already knew. Not only was the lake mine, but the entire path, all the way up to their back fence, also mine, every inch. No easements, no shared use, no gray area. So I took it a step further. I had the surveyor place brand new property markers, highly visible, and cemented into the ground. I even paid extra to have a series of private property, no trespassing signs installed along the trail and around the lake. Every 50 feet like clockwork. No one could say they didn't know. Then I set up a trail camera, motion triggered, high resolution, hidden in the trees, but aimed directly at the access point from their neighborhood park. And then I waited. It didn't take long. Within a week I had photos of multiple people crossing onto my land, adults with fishing poles, kids on bikes. One guy even walked his dog down the trail, let it run into the lake, and then left a bag of poop hanging on a branch. That was it. I compiled the photos, printed them, time-stamped and labeled. Then I drafted a formal notice to the HOA board. It was polite, but firm. It stated that they were using private property without permission, that I had clear evidence of trespassing, that I intended to pursue legal action if the activity didn't stop immediately. I sent the letter by certified mail and waited. No response, no apology, no acknowledgement, just silence. So I called my lawyer. He reviewed the situation, looked over the property survey, and practically laughed. They're trespassing, plain and simple. We could go nuclear if you want. And honestly, I did. But first, we decided on a strategic next step, a formal cease and desist order, hand-delivered to the HOA office and CC'd to every board member. It outlined the violations, presented the photo evidence, and gave them 10 business days to respond, or face a civil lawsuit for damages and legal costs. This time they responded through their own attorney. Their position? That the trail had been used for years by neighborhood residents and should therefore be considered a prescriptive easement. In plain terms, they argued that because they illegally used the trail for so long, they had somehow earned the right to keep using it. My lawyer wasn't having it. He fired back with case law, property rights statutes, and photographic evidence that not only had the trail never been formally recognized, but that I had posted clear signage as soon as I became aware. That killed their prescriptive use argument dead in its tracks. But we didn't stop there. My attorney sent a second notice, this time with a bill. A demand for damages, for unauthorized use of the land, for trespassing, and for littering. We also included a proposed licensing agreement. If the HOA wanted to continue offering lake access to its residents, they'd have to pay for it. And not some token fee either. A full commercial lease agreement with annual renewal and maintenance. Terms their response? Outrage. Emails leaked. One board member reportedly called me a greedy land baron. Another suggested filing a countersuit for emotional distress. But behind closed doors they were panicking, because suddenly their residents, many of whom had bought homes specifically because of the lake access, were asking questions. Turns out, the HOA had been marketing the lake in brochures and open house tours for years, claiming it was part of the community, claiming it was theirs. And now? It wasn't just a legal problem, it was a PR nightmare. Residents were furious. Some demanded refunds, others started looking into class action lawsuits for misrepresentation of amenities. Meanwhile, I kept documenting everything. More trail cam footage, more photos, even a few angry confrontations, caught on camera, of HOA residents yelling at my nephews for playing too loud by the water on our land. At this point, I'd had enough, so I closed the trail entirely, felled a few trees across the entrance, stacked some brush, installed a steel gate with a lock, and mounted another sign. Private property, no access, trespassers will be prosecuted. And just to drive the point home, I filed a formal complaint with the county zoning office and environmental enforcement. Turns out building unauthorized trails through protected woodland is a big no-no. That got their attention. Suddenly, the HOA's lawyer was much more cooperative. They offered a settlement. They'd stop using the trail, remove all references to the lake in their marketing materials, and send a written apology to avoid escalation. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted accountability. So I added one final condition. The HOA president, the same person who called the cops on me that night at the lake, had to personally sign the letter, admitting the land was never theirs, admitting they were wrong. And you know what? He did. Today, that trail remains closed. The brush has grown back. My lake is quiet again, just as my grandfather intended, a place for family, not entitled neighbors. And the HOA? They now have to explain to every new buyer why the lake access suddenly disappeared, and why there's a big iron gate with my last name welded into it, standing right at the edge of their so-called community park. So next time someone tells you HOAs protect property values, ask them what happens when they trespass on the wrong ranch, because I wasn't just some weekend camper. I was the owner, and they learned that the hard way. They thought my lake was theirs. Until I hit them with a $42,000 reality check. For years, the HOA treated my private lake like their personal playground. They fished there, held barbecues, threw birthday parties for their kids, all without asking, all without permission, and most importantly, all on my land, and I didn't even know it. Not at first. But the day they called the cops on me for trespassing on my own property, that's when everything changed. It all started. One summer weekend. I had taken my nephews camping at the lake, the one nestled at the edge of my 80-acre ranch. We set up tents, built a campfire, and started roasting marshmallows as the sun dipped behind the trees. It was peaceful. It was private. It was ours. But just as we started telling ghost stories, 2 flashlights beamed through the woods. 2 officers stepped into our camp, hands on their hips. One of them asked, "Are you the property owner here?" I stood up a little confused and said, "Yes, this is my land." Apparently someone from the neighboring HOA had reported us, claimed we were unauthorized campers on their community lake. I almost laughed. "This isn't their lake," I told the officers. "This lake is on my deed. I can show you the parcel lines right now." They seemed skeptical at first until I walked them back to my truck and pulled out a binder of documents. It had everything. My land survey, the plat map, even the closing papers from when I bought the property. The officers glanced through it, made a few calls, and sure enough, they realized the HOA president had filed a bogus report. One of them muttered, "Well, looks like we've got the wrong address." They apologized and left, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Why would the HOA call the cops unless they truly believed the lake belonged to them? The next morning, I decided to investigate. I walked to the far end of the lake, the side that bordered the HOA development, and what I found stunned me. There, cutting through the woods, was a well-worn dirt path. It looked like it had been used for years. There were fresh footprints, mountain bike tracks, and even tire ruts from what looked like golf carts or ATVs. As I followed the trail deeper, I noticed trash bags, drink cans, fishing line, all the kind of stuff you'd expect after a group hangout. Then I reached the edge of the trail and stared in disbelief. Someone had built a makeshift sign, nailed to a post stuck in the ground, that read, "Lake access, community use only." Community use? Of my lake? I snapped a photo, then followed the trail just a bit further. It led directly to a park behind one of the HOA cul-de-sacs. Picnic tables, a grill, a swing set. There was even a laminated community bulletin board, and on it, taped in the corner, was a flyer. 4th of July, BBQ. Join us for fishing food. And fireworks at the lake. I couldn't believe it. They weren't just using the land, they were hosting events on it. The HOA had been holding community parties on my property, without permission, and apparently for years. Not once had they contacted me. Not once had they asked. Not once had they paid a dime. I took dozens of photos. The trail, the tire marks, the flyer, the sign. I was livid, and I wasn't going to let this slide. The next week I called my attorney. We filed a formal claim against the HOA for ongoing trespass, misuse of private land, and unauthorized community access. We included a request for damages, legal fees, cleanup costs, and most importantly, we demanded a permanent easement block. Their response? Silence. For about a week. Then their lawyer called mine. He was polite, even apologetic. Said it must have been an innocent misunderstanding. Claimed they thought the lake was part of the shared greenbelt. Nice try. But we had the survey maps and they were airtight. We knew exactly where the property line was. It was even marked in the county GIS. And just to drive the point home, we'd pulled aerial drone footage showing the trail cutting directly from their park into my woods, and ending at the lake's edge. There was no misunderstanding. There was just trespassing. What made it worse? We discovered that several previous HOA board members knew about the land issue, and deliberately ignored it. They had hosted a fishing contest in the spring, a child's birthday party in June, and a massive 4th of July BBQ the previous years all on my property. They even charged HOA dues to cover the event costs, and advertised the lake as an amenity in their new buyer packets. That's right, they were literally selling houses using my lake as a marketing point. That point, their lawyer tried to settle. They offered a formal apology, said they'd remove the trail, even promised to send a thank you letter. But I wasn't interested in apologies. I wanted accountability. So we pushed forward with the claim, and outlined exactly what we expected. Full compensation for land misuse, going back 3 years. Payment for cleanup and restoration, including trash removal and reseeding damaged areas. Legal fees in full. And a signed agreement that the HOA would build a physical fence to block off access, permanently. Their lawyer tried to negotiate, but we didn't budge. The evidence was overwhelming. We had documents, drone footage, GPS-tagged trail cams, physical items from the site, and a clear timeline of events. Eventually, the HOA caved. They agreed to pay $42,000 in total damages, including $15,000 for 3 years of unauthorized use, $7,000 for trash removal and land repair, $10,000 for legal fees, and another $10,000 as a penalty and goodwill gesture, just to make sure we wouldn't escalate it to court. But the best part? They were forced to install a permanent fence along the property line, 6 feet tall, with a locked gate accessible only by me. They even had to pay a contractor to landscape it and add a posted sign that read, "Private property, no access, beyond this point." The trail is gone now. The brush has regrown, and the only footprints on that lake shore are mine, and my nephew's. when we go fishing or camping together. The HOA, they've been unusually quiet. They've stopped advertising lake access in their listings, stopped hosting fishing contests, and from what I've heard, the former board president quietly resigned after the settlement. As for me, I didn't just reclaim my land. I protected it, legally, permanently, and with a firm message. You don't get to take what isn't yours, just because you think no one's watching. They thought they could use my land for free, hold parties, even call the cops on me. Instead, they got slapped with a $42,000 bill and a brand new fence that reminds them, every single day, exactly where their property ends and where mine begins. Today, my lake is peaceful again, quiet, serene, untouched by the chaos of HOA drama and neighborhood politics. It's once again the kind of place where you can hear the wind rustling through the trees, the frogs croaking at night, and the soft lapping of water against the shore. But it wasn't always that way, and it sure as hell didn't get back to this state without a fight. Let me take you back. It all started when I took my nephews on a simple camping trip. That was the plan. Nothing fancy. Just a weekend under the stars, roasting marshmallows, telling ghost stories, and showing them the same slice of nature my granddad once showed me when I was their age. My lake sits on the back half of my ranch, a quiet tucked-away spot passed down through my family for generations. It's private land, always has been. I've got the deed, the maps, the surveys, the whole 9 yards, but apparently no one told the HOA next door. We were deep into our second night, fire crackling, kids laughing, marshmallows melting, into gooey bliss, when headlights broke through the trees. Then came the flashlights, and then came the voices. Sheriff's Department, anyone here? I stood up confused. 2 officers stepped into the glow of the fire. Behind them, I could see the familiar face of Karen, the president of the neighboring HOA, standing just at the edge of the woods with her arms crossed like she was queen of the forest. "We got a call about trespassers," one officer said. I laughed. "You're looking at the owner. This is my land." That's when Karen piped up. "That's community land. This entire lake belongs to our HOA. I have the documents." "No, you don't," I said, "because it doesn't." The officers were professional. I'll give them that. They asked to see some ID and documentation, which I happened to have in the truck nearby. A quick check of the property app on the county's GIS website cleared things up fast. I even pulled out the old laminated copy of the survey, complete with the lake's boundaries clearly marked, all on my parcel. The officers nodded. One of them gave me a half-apologetic shrug and turned back to Karen. "Ma'am, this isn't your land. Please don't call us out here again for something like this." Karen didn't speak, just stood there fuming while the officers walked back toward the road. But that moment, right there, told me something wasn't right. Why would the HOA president think this lake was theirs? Why was she so confident? The next morning, after the kids packed up and we cleaned the site, I took a long walk around the edge of the lake. I hadn't done that in months. There was a trail I didn't recognize, worn down by foot traffic, snaking through the trees to the far side. Tire tracks, footprints, even some trash bags, soda cans, a couple fishing bobbers. Something told me to follow the path. It led straight into the HOA neighborhood, through a narrow patch of woods that connected their park to my lake. Someone had even put up a hand-carved sign that said, "Lake Access." There was a worn plank across the stream and cut-back brush forming a clean path. That's when it hit me. They knew. They knew this wasn't their land. That's why there was no official trail, no mention on the HOA documents. This was all unofficial, unauthorized, hidden. They had been using my lake for years, behind my back, probably assuming I'd never notice. Well, I noticed now. So I started documenting everything. Photos of the trail, trash left behind, footage from a game camera I set up near the access point. I even got drone footage showing the clear path leading straight from their park into my land. I pulled the original land surveys, matched them with county records, and had a licensed surveyor come out again, just to be airtight. Then I checked public HOA records, and that's when things got even worse. The HOA had actually hosted events at the lake. I found newsletters and social media posts with phrases like, "Annual Family Fishing Day at the Lake," and "Join us at the community lake for our July 4th BBQ. One post even showed Karen holding a fishing rod next to a sign that read, "HOA members only beyond this point." The audacity was unbelievable. So I called a lawyer. We filed a formal claim against the HOA for trespass, misuse of private land, and unauthorized access. When the HOA's attorney responded, they tried to argue the lake was commonly understood to be part of the neighborhood's amenities, which of course is total nonsense. Common understanding doesn't override legal boundaries. That's when I made it public. I posted signs all around the perimeter. Private property, no trespassing, surveillance in use. Trespassers will be prosecuted. I even put up a gate at the trailhead and blocked off the path leading in from the HOA side. That same weekend, 3 different residents from the neighborhood came up to my gate, confused and angry. "Why can't we fish here anymore?" "This has always been the neighborhood's lake," I calmly explained. Every single time, that the lake had always been private, and that the neighborhood had been trespassing for years without permission. And then, the backlash started. HOA board members sent me nasty letters. Karen threatened legal action. One guy even tried to push the gate open until he saw the security camera blinking above him. Then came the cherry on top, a cease and desist letter sent to me, accusing me of blocking community access and threatening to report me to the county. Big mistake. My attorney fired back with a full packet of evidence. Not just photos and video, but records of their public events, proof of private ownership, and a clear outline of our intent to seek damages if the harassment didn't stop. After that, it went quiet. A week later, the HOA called an emergency board meeting. A month later, residents received a formal letter. It was the kind of letter no HOA ever wants to send, a complete walkback of everything they'd claimed. It read, "Dear residents, after a formal review and legal consultation, it has been determined that the lake area previously accessed through the community trail is, in fact, privately owned and not part of HOA common property. Residents are prohibited from accessing the lake or surrounding land moving forward. Violators may face fines or legal prosecution. We apologize for the confusion and urge all members to respect private property boundaries." Karen resigned 2 months later, quietly, without fanfare. No email, no thank you note, just gone. And me? I did what my grandfather would have done. I cleaned up the lakefront, put in a new fire ring, built a picnic table from old cedar planks, planted a few trees near the edge. Then I installed a sign, just a small one, made from the same wood as the table. Nothing fancy. It reads, "Family Lake, private property, campers welcome, trespassers, not so much." These days, my nephews and I still camp there. They bring their friends. Sometimes their parents tag along. We fish, we cook, we laugh, and we do it in peace, knowing that no one's going to come charging in with a flashlight yelling about rules that don't apply. The lake is mine. Always was, and now everyone knows it. They thought they could claim my land and get away with it, but the law was on my side. Now they know don't trespass, and definitely don't mess with my dog. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe for more crazy real estate drama, and drop a comment if you've ever had to deal with an out-of-control HOA. See you in the next one.